When the Galactic Council declared that humans were physically and mentally inferior and banned them from all dangerous professions across the galaxy, they expected compliance. What they got instead was the most spectacular display of human stubbornness the universe had ever witnessed. It started with 3 simple words from Captain Jake Morrison, delivered with a beer bottle in one hand and a cocky grin on his face. "Hold my beer." Those words would echo across star systems, inspiring the greatest uprising of human defiance in galactic history. Because when you tell a human they can't do something, you've just given them their new favorite hobby. And when an entire species gets told they're not good enough, well, that's when things get really interesting. This is the story of how humanity didn't just prove the aliens wrong. They made them beg for mercy while doing it. The crystal spires of the Galactic Council chambers gleamed under artificial starlight as Ambassador Chun Wei straightened her diplomatic uniform. Around the circular assembly hall, representatives from 47 different species sat in carefully arranged tiers, their various forms of breathing apparatus creating a symphony of mechanical whirs and biological sighs. At the center podium, High Chancellor Vexthal of the Korthani Empire raised his 6 arms for attention. His chitinous exoskeleton caught the light as he prepared to deliver what he believed would be routine administrative business. The massive insectoid's compound eyes swept across the assembly before settling on the small human delegation seated in the newcomer section. "Esteemed council members," Vexthal's voice resonated through universal translators in dozens of languages. "We gather today to address the integration protocols for the newest member species, the humans of Sol 3. Chen exchanged glances with her fellow human delegates. Captain Jake Morrison, on loan from Earth Space Force, lounged in his chair with characteristic casual confidence. Dr. Sarah Kim, their xenobiologist, took careful notes on her datapad. General Marcus Rodriguez maintained his military bearing despite the obvious tension in the air. After extensive evaluation by our scientific committees, Vexthal continued, we have reached several important conclusions regarding human capabilities and limitations within galactic society. The Zephyrian representative, a graceful being of flowing energy contained within a crystalline form, pulsed with what humans had learned indicated agreement. The research has been most thorough, Chancellor. Chen felt her stomach tighten. The evaluation process had taken 6 months, during which teams of alien scientists had tested, measured, and analyzed every aspect of human physiology and psychology. The tests had been invasive, exhausting, and often humiliating. The results are clear and undeniable, Vexthal announced, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. Humans demonstrate significantly inferior physical capabilities compared to established galactic norms. Their bone density is approximately 30% lower than standard. Their muscle fiber efficiency rates poorly against even basic worker species. Their sensory organs are limited to an embarrassingly narrow spectrum. Murmurs of what sounded like agreement rippled through the assembly. Chun watched as the delegate from Proxima Centauri, a hulking, rock-skinned being called a Titan, nodded its massive head. Furthermore, the Chancellor continued, psychological evaluation reveals disturbing tendencies toward irrational behavior, emotional instability, and dangerous risk-taking that makes them unsuitable for critical roles in galactic society. Captain Morrison shifted in his seat, his jaw clenching. Chen placed a warning hand on his arm. Therefore, by unanimous vote of the Evaluation Committee, the Galactic Council hereby restricts humans from all professions involving space combat, deep space exploration beyond supervised zones, xenobiological research in hazardous environments, and any position requiring split-second decision-making under extreme stress. The weight of those words hit the human delegation like a physical blow. Chun stood slowly, her diplomatic training warring with the fury building in her chest. Honored Chancellor, she began, her voice steady despite the tremor of anger. These restrictions would essentially bar humans from meaningful participation in galactic civilization. We came here seeking partnership, not to be treated as second-class citizens. The Aquarian delegate, a graceful, tentacled being from a water world, rippled what humans had learned was laughter. Ambassador Chun, these are not restrictions, but protections. Your species simply lacks the necessary qualities for dangerous work. accept your limitations, and find roles more suited to your abilities. Such as, General Rodriguez asked, his voice carrying decades of military authority. Hospitality services, suggested the vegan representative, a plant-like being whose flowers bloomed with condescension. Food preparation for species with compatible dietary needs. Perhaps some basic manufacturing roles under proper supervision. The silence that followed was deafening. Chen could feel the collective breath of her species being held across the galaxy, as live feeds carried these proceedings to Earth and every human colony. It was Captain Morrison who finally broke that silence. He stood up slowly, reached into his uniform pocket, and pulled out something that made several alien delegates lean forward in confusion. A brown glass bottle containing amber liquid. "Well," he said, his voice carrying across the chamber with dangerous calm. "That's interesting." He twisted off the bottle cap with a sharp crack that echoed in the vast space. The liquid inside caught the artificial starlight. "You see, honored aliens," Morrison continued, taking a small sip before setting the bottle down on the table in front of him. "Where I come from, when someone tells us we can't do something, we have a very specific response." The Korthani Chancellor's compound eyes focused on the human captain. "And what response is that?" Morrison's grin was sharp enough to cut through hull plating. "Hold my beer." The phrase meant nothing to the assembled aliens, but the way he said it, with absolute confidence and just a hint of madness, made more than one representative shift uncomfortably. "Captain Morrison," Chun whispered urgently, "what are you doing?" But Morrison was already moving. He walked to the center of the chamber, his boots clicking against the polished floor, until he stood directly in front of the Chancellor's towering form. "Your evaluation missed something important," he announced loudly enough for every delegate to hear. "You tested our limits, but you never tested what happens when we decide those limits don't apply." The Titan delegate rumbled with what might have been amusement. "Human, your defiance is noted but irrelevant. Physical laws do not change based on your emotional state." "Physical laws?" Morrison laughed, the sound somehow both casual and threatening. "Friend, we've been breaking physical laws for fun since before we could write. Ever heard of the 4-minute mile? Doctors said it was physically impossible. Then, Roger Bannister decided their math was wrong. He gestured toward his fellow humans. How about the sound barrier? Experts proved human reflexes couldn't handle supersonic flight. Then, Chuck Yeager went and broke that particular rule too." The Chancellor's mandibles clicked impatiently. "These are merely minor improvements within expected parameters minor." Morrison's voice rose. "We went from first flight to landing on our moon in 66 years. We created artificial intelligence, decoded our own genetic structure, and split atoms just to see what would happen. And you think we're going to let a committee meeting stop us?" The assembly had grown very quiet. Even the various breathing apparatuses seemed to whisper more softly. Dr. Kim stood up next, her scientific mind clearly racing. "Captain Morrison raises an excellent point. Our evaluation protocols may have been fundamentally flawed from the beginning." "Impossible," the Aquarian delegate responded. "Our testing methods are standardized across thousands of species. They are mathematically precise." "Mathematically precise at measuring what we are," Kim countered, "not what we become when properly motivated." General Rodriguez rose to his full height, his chest heavy with medals from conflicts the aliens couldn't even imagine. "With respect, honored delegates, your tests measured us at rest. You never saw us angry." A ripple of unease passed through the chamber. The concept of an entire species becoming angry was apparently new to most of the assembly. Ambassador Chen realized that the careful diplomatic approach she'd planned was already dead. Her delegates had chosen a different path, and, looking at their faces, she found herself wanting to follow them down it. "Perhaps," she said, her voice carrying newfound steel, "we should provide a demonstration." The Chancellor leaned forward, his massive form casting shadows across the human delegation. "Ambassador, are you suggesting your species intends to deliberately violate Council restrictions?" Chen looked at Morrison's beer bottle, still sitting on their table like a thrown gauntlet. She thought about every human who would watch this broadcast, who would hear that they weren't good enough, strong enough, smart enough to join the galactic community as equals. "No, Chancellor," she replied with a smile that would have made Morrison proud. I'm not suggesting it. I'm promising it. The chamber erupted in alien voices, translators struggling to keep up with the chaos of 47 different languages expressing shock, outrage, and, in a few cases, what might have been excitement. Morrison walked back to his seat, picked up his beer, and raised it in a mock toast to the assembly. Ladies and gentlemen, you just gave 4 billion humans the same challenge. And, trust me, that's about 3,900,000,000 too many. As the council chamber dissolved into pandemonium, no one noticed the small device Dr. Kim activated under the table. The quantum communicator would ensure that every human settlement in the galaxy received the same message within hours. The aliens think we can't do it. Time to prove them wrong. Hold their beer. The greatest demonstration of human capability in galactic history was about to begin, and it would start with the 3 words that had launched 10,000 adventures, sparked countless innovations, and turned impossible into inevitable. The words that meant someone was about to do something spectacular or die trying. The words that had just declared war on the very concept of human limitations. Hold my beer. The news of the Galactic Council's restrictions spread across human space faster than light itself, carried by quantum entanglement communicators to every colony, station, and ship bearing a human crew. Within 6 hours of Ambassador Chen's promise, the response began. It started small, as these things always did. On Kepler Station, orbiting a red dwarf 37 light-years from Earth, Chief Engineer Rosa Martinez was 3 drinks into her off shift when the broadcast reached the civilian quarters main screen. Around her, the usual crowd of miners, traders, and station workers grew increasingly quiet as Chancellor Vexthal's words echoed through the bar. 30% lower bone density, she muttered, setting down her whiskey with enough force to make the bartender wince. Muscle fiber efficiency rates poorly. The Proximan trader at the next table, one of the few aliens who frequented human establishments, shifted nervously in his environmental suit. Rosa, please understand, the Council's decision is based on extensive scientific. Martinez stood up, all 5 feet of her radiating the kind of dangerous energy that made smart people step back. You want to see some science? She walked to the bar's main window, which offered a spectacular view of the asteroid mining operation that supplied half the rare metals for this sector. Massive chunks of rock and metal drifted in the stellar wind, each one marked with extraction points and navigation beacons. See that rock out there? The big one with the platinum veins. She pointed to an asteroid roughly the size of a city block. Council safety regulations say it takes a crew of 12 with Zephyrian-built extraction equipment 6 weeks to process. The Proximan nodded. Yes, standard procedure ensures I can do it in 3 days. The bar went completely silent. Alone. The silence stretched until someone laughed nervously. Then, Martinez was moving, grabbing her toolkit, and heading for the airlock. Jimmy, she called to the bartender. Hold my beer, and keep the cameras running. By the time station security realized what was happening, Martinez was already suited up and launching herself toward the asteroid in a standard maintenance pod. Behind her, the bar's emergency broadcast system activated automatically as her plan became clear. She wasn't just going to mine the asteroid. She was going to show them what human stubbornness looked like when properly focused. 3-star systems away, Captain Elena Vasquez received the Council broadcast while conducting routine patrol sweeps along the frontier rim. Her ship, the U.S. Defiant, was a mid-range exploration vessel designed for deep space reconnaissance, exactly the kind of mission humans were now banned from. Ma'am, her communications officer called out, we're receiving priority messages from Earth Command, Mars Central, and pretty much every human authority in known space. Vasquez studied the official recall orders flooding her screens. Report to nearest Council station. Submit to escort back to human-controlled space. Cease all unauthorized exploration activities immediately. She looked out at the cosmic vista before them, an uncharted nebula that stretched across 3 light years, filled with phenomena that made their instruments sing with possibility. Her crew of 23 had spent 8 months mapping this region, discovering 2 new stellar nurseries and 3 potentially habitable worlds. Helm, she said quietly, plot a course deeper into the nebula. Ma'am, The recall orders dash are suggestions. She turned to face her crew, seeing her own defiance reflected in their eyes. Anyone who wants to transfer to a council-approved assignment is free to take a shuttle back. But I signed up to explore strange new worlds, not to babysit cargo containers in safe space. Not one crew member moved toward the shuttle base. Very well then. Vasquez settled into her captain's chair with grim satisfaction. Comms, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we'll be conducting an extended scientific survey of this region. Tell them we'll return when we're done. And if they ask how long that might take, Vasquez smiled. Tell them to hold our beer. The Defiance disappeared into the swirling clouds of the nebula, her transponder going dark as she entered a region of space that Council safety regulations declared absolutely off-limits to vessels without Class A shielding and Titan-grade hull reinforcement. She had neither. On the mining world of New Colorado, Foreman Jack Sullivan was dealing with a crisis when the broadcast reached the work site. A massive geological instability had opened a chasm that threatened to swallow their primary extraction equipment, worth approximately 50 million credits and representing 6 months of work. Standard protocol called for evacuation and a council emergency response team. The nearest team was 8 days away. Sullivan stood at the edge of the chasm, watching their machinery slowly sliding towards certain destruction. Behind him, his crew of miners waited for orders. Most were humans who had been mining dangerous asteroids and unstable worlds for decades before the council decided they weren't qualified for hazardous work. Boss, called out Maria Santos, his demolitions expert. What's the call? Sullivan considered the regulations, the safety protocols, the fact that attempting a rescue would violate approximately 15 council directives and probably get them all banned from mining forever. Then, he considered the alternative. Maria, he said, prep the charges. Danny, get the mag-lift rigs online. Rodriguez, start welding anchor points. Boss, the regs can kiss my ass. Sullivan spit into the chasm and turned to face his crew. Those council bureaucrats think we can't handle dangerous work? Let's show them what dangerous really looks like. He grabbed a beer from the portable cooler near the foreman's shack and set it carefully on a rock. Hold this. We're going mining. What followed was the kind of operation that would be talked about in mining circles for decades. Using controlled explosions to stabilize the geology while simultaneously rigging a retrieval system that violated every known safety protocol. Sullivan's crew worked for 18 straight hours in conditions that would have killed any other species. They didn't just save the equipment. They improved the mine's output efficiency by 30% and discovered a new vein of rare earth metals worth twice the original investment. The success was broadcast across the mining networks within hours. On Luna Base, the oldest permanent human settlement outside Earth, Admiral Sarah Chun, the ambassador's older sister, called an emergency meeting of the Space Force High Command. The admirals and generals who gathered in the secure conference room represented 50 years of human expansion into space. Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Chun began, we have a problem. The Galactic Council has essentially declared that human beings are unfit for service in space. General Thompson, a scarred veteran of the outer colony conflicts, leaned forward. And our response? Officially, we comply with all council directives and restrictions. Chen's smile was sharp enough to cut Diamond. Unofficially? Well, that's a different matter entirely. She activated the room's holographic display, showing a real-time map of human space. Red indicators marked council observation stations. Green showed human-controlled systems. And scattered throughout were yellow dots, human ships, and stations operating in the gray areas between official and forbidden. As of this moment, we have 47 vessels conducting routine maintenance in regions the Council considers too dangerous for human presence. We have mining operations extracting resources from unstable asteroids. We have research teams studying hostile alien artifacts. Admiral Martinez raised an eyebrow. And if the Council notices? They already have. We're receiving formal complaints from 6 different member species about unauthorized human activities. Chin's grin widened. The Korthani are particularly upset about our reckless disregard for established safety protocols. So what's the plan? Chin stood up and walked to the window overlooking Earth. her home planet hanging like a blue jewel in the void. The plan, gentlemen, is to be so thoroughly human that the Council has no choice but to acknowledge what we really are. She turned back to the assembled officers. Every time they say we can't do something, we do it better than anyone has ever done it before. Every time they declare something too dangerous for human involvement, we make it look easy. Every time they try to put us in our place, we redefine what our place actually is. General Kim, the youngest officer present, spoke up. And if they threaten consequences? Admiral Chin's expression hardened. Then, they'll learn why "hold my beer" is the most dangerous phrase in the human language. The orders that went out from Luna Base that night were carefully worded and officially ambiguous. But their intent was crystal clear. Show them what human really means. Across the galaxy, humans responded. Asteroid miners pushed their equipment beyond all safety limits and doubled their extraction rates. Deep space explorers ventured into regions marked as certain death and returned with evidence of incredible discoveries. Military units conducted training exercises in environments so hostile that other species required environmental suits just to observe from orbit. On every human world, in every human settlement, the message was the same. The aliens think we have limits. Let's prove them wrong. And in the hidden channels where humans shared their successes, failures, and plans, a new tradition emerged. Every successful mission, every impossible achievement, every moment when humans exceeded what others thought possible, ended with the same image, an empty beer bottle, and 3 simple words. Mission accomplished. Hold my beer. The Galactic Council was about to learn that telling humans they couldn't do something wasn't a limitation. It was a challenge. And humans never backed down from a challenge. 3 weeks after the Council's declaration, the first official complaints began arriving at Galactic Council headquarters. They came in steadily increasing numbers, each one more incredulous than the last. High Chancellor Vexthal reviewed them in his private office, his compound eyes struggling to process what he was reading. The reports defied everything the Council knew about human capabilities. From the Korthani Mining Consortium, humans on asteroid KX 7739 completed extraction operations in 72% less time than our most optimistic projections. They used equipment rated for basic operations to perform advanced geological manipulation. When questioned, the human foreman stated he was just getting started. From the Zephyrian Deep Space Authority, the human vessel UES Defiance has been detected operating within the Maelstrom Nebula, a region requiring Class A radiation shielding. The ship possesses only basic deflector arrays. Crew should be deceased. They are instead transmitting detailed scientific data and requesting permission to extend their mission. From the Aquarian Research Institute, human xenobiologist teams have established contact with the void dwellers of Sector 12, beings we classified as impossible to approach safely. The humans report productive diplomatic relations and have somehow convinced these hostile entities to participate in joint research projects. Vexthal set down the latest batch of reports and activated his communication array. Get me the evaluation committee. Emergency session. An hour later, the same alien scientists who had pronounced humans unfit for dangerous work sat around the oval conference table, their expressions ranging from confusion to outright disbelief. Dr. Hexel, the Proximan physiologist, consulted her data pad with trembling appendages. The readings we're receiving cannot be accurate. These humans are performing tasks that should kill them based on our biological assessments. Perhaps, suggested the Titan researcher, the humans are using undisclosed technology? Negative. Dr. Zeph, the energy-based Zephyrian, pulsed with agitation. Our monitoring stations confirm they are using standard equipment, often inferior to recommended specifications. If anything, they appear to be deliberately handicapping themselves. Vexthal's mandibles clicked ominously. Explain. The mining operation on KX 7739, Zeph continued. The humans completed the job using tools rated for half the material density they encountered. When better equipment was offered, they declined. The foreman's exact words were, "Where's the fun in that?" The room fell silent except for the various breathing apparatus. There may be another explanation, offered Dr. Membrane, the gelatinous representative from the Outer Rim colonies. What if our fundamental assumptions about human psychology were incorrect? All eyes turned to her translucent form. Elaborate. We evaluated humans under controlled conditions, assuming they would perform consistently under all circumstances. But what if humans don't work that way? What if they have a scaling factor? Dr. Hexel's data pad chimed with an incoming report. She read it quickly, her already pale complexion becoming translucent. Chancellor, we just received word from the frontier rim. The human ship Defiance has made contact with the architects. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. That's impossible, Vexthul stated flatly. The architects exist in 11-dimensional space. No three-dimensional being has ever successfully communicated with them. The Defiance crew not only made contact, Hexel continued, her voice barely above a whisper. They've been invited aboard an architect vessel for cultural exchange. The silence that followed was the kind that accompanies the witnessing of natural disasters or the collapse of fundamental beliefs. Meanwhile, 40 light-years away, Captain Elena Vasquez stood in what she could only describe as a space that existed in more directions than her brain was equipped to process. The architect entity before her communicated through patterns of reality distortion that her ship's AI translated into something approximating language. Curious/surprised/impressed, the translation appeared on her visor. The small-dimensional ones show unexpected depth. How do you exist in so few spatial planes? Practice, Vasquez replied, hoping her communications array was working. And stubbornness. Stubbornness/persistence/will beyond logic. This concept is fascinating. Your species chooses to exceed its limitations through force of will. Pretty much, she confirmed. When someone tells us something is impossible, we tend to take that personally. The space around her shifted in what she was beginning to recognize as architect laughter. Your emotional response to limitation creates capability beyond measured parameters. This explains the paradox. What paradox? Your council neighbors measure what you are. We observe what you become. The differential is entertaining. 3 days later, the Defiance returned to normal space, carrying data that would revolutionize human understanding of higher dimensional physics. The architects had not only shared their technology, they had invited humanity to participate in what they called the Great Work, projects spanning multiple dimensional planes that required beings capable of growth beyond their initial limitations. Captain Vasquez's report to Earth Command was brief. Mission successful. The architects like us. Apparently, we remind them of themselves when they were younger. Also, they want to teach us to build things in 11 dimensions. Might want to update the academy curriculum. Back on New Colorado, Jack Sullivan's mining operation had become something of a legend. Word of his impossible equipment retrieval had spread through the mining networks, attracting attention from across the galaxy. What had started as a single desperate operation had evolved into something unprecedented. Boss, Maria Santos called out from the edge of their latest excavation site. We've got visitors. Sullivan looked up from the geological survey to see a delegation of alien observers approaching the site. Leading them was a Titan in full environmental gear, followed by representatives from 4 other species. Foreman Sullivan, the Titan announced through his translator. I am Chief Engineer Krex of the Galactic Mining Authority. We are here to observe your operations. Sullivan wiped cold dust from his hands and walked over. Observe away. Just try not to get in the way. Our preliminary reports indicate impossibilities in your extraction rates and safety protocols. We have come to determine how this is being accomplished. Sullivan grinned. Fair enough. But I should warn you, we're about to attempt something really stupid. He gestured toward the mountainside behind them, where his crew had spent the last week preparing for what they called the Big One, an extraction operation that involved removing an entire mountain in a single coordinated blast. That formation contains enough rare minerals to supply 3 sectors, he explained. Standard protocol says it would take 6 months with a full council engineering team. And your time frame? Krex asked. 4 hours. The alien observers exchanged glances that managed to convey skepticism across multiple species barriers. Foreman Sullivan, a Zephyrian representative, pulsed. Our calculations indicate that such an operation would require precision beyond current technological capabilities. Your calculations, Sullivan replied, didn't account for human stubbornness. What followed was a masterclass in applied impossibility. Sullivan's crew used a combination of controlled explosives, gravitational field manipulation, and what could only be described as choreographed chaos to disassemble an entire mountain in exactly 3 hours and 47 minutes. When the dust settled, they had not only extracted every gram of valuable material but had done so without a single injury or equipment failure. The alien observers stood in stunned silence as Sullivan walked over to where he'd left his beer cooling in a makeshift ice bucket. "Gentlemen," he said, raising the bottle in a mock toast, "that's how you hold a beer." Chief Engineer Krex's massive form trembled slightly. "Foreman, this operation should have been impossible. Our modeling software cannot explain how you achieve these results." Sullivan took a long drink before answering. "That's your problem right there. You're using modeling software. We're using human engineering. What is the difference? Modeling software tells you what can't be done. Human engineering tells you to hold its beer, and watch this." The reports from these observations reached the Galactic Council within days. Each one painted the same impossible picture. Humans routinely accomplishing things that violated established scientific understanding of what their species should be capable of. On Luna Base, Admiral Sarah Chun was hosting a different kind of meeting. Representatives from 12 alien species had requested informal discussions about human activities. They sat around her conference table looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Admiral Chun," began the Proximan trade delegate, "we need to discuss the irregularities in human performance." "Irregularities? Your species is exceeding our projections by factors that suggest our evaluation methods may have been inadequate." Chun smiled politely. "Or maybe you just asked the wrong questions." The Korthani military attaché leaned forward. "Admiral, we measured your physical capabilities precisely. Your bone density, muscle efficiency, neural processing speeds, all documented and verified. You measured us sitting still in a laboratory," Chun replied. "You never measured us angry. Angry, motivated, challenged, told we couldn't do something." Chun stood and walked to the window overlooking Earth. "You made one fundamental error in your evaluation. Which was, you assumed humans have limits." She turned back to face the assembled aliens. "We don't. We have starting points." The Zephyrian representative pulsed with what might have been confusion. "All species have physical limitations imposed by their biology." "Do they?" Chun asked. "Or do they just accept the limitations others tell them they have?" She activated the room's display system, showing real-time feeds from human operations across the galaxy. Mining ships working in impossible conditions. Research teams making contact with hostile aliens. Military units training in environments that should have been lethal. Every one of these operations was declared impossible by your evaluation standards. Every one is being performed by humans who were told they weren't good enough. Chin's smile sharpened. "Turns out, telling a human they can't do something is the fastest way to ensure they'll figure out how to do it." The alien representatives watched the feeds in growing amazement and alarm. "Admiral," the Proximan said slowly, "if these readings are accurate, humans may be the most dangerous species in the galaxy." "Dangerous?" Chun laughed. "Gentlemen, you haven't seen dangerous yet. This is just us getting warmed up." She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a bottle of Earth whiskey, setting it carefully on the conference table. "The real question is, are you going to keep telling us we can't do things? Because if you are," she smiled with genuine warmth that somehow managed to be absolutely terrifying. "Well, we do love a good challenge." The aliens looked at the bottle, then at Chun, then at each other. None of them asked what the bottle was for. They were beginning to understand that they didn't want to know. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened exactly 6 weeks after their original declaration about human limitations. This time, the atmosphere in the crystal-spired chamber was markedly different. Where once there had been condescension and casual dismissal, now there was nervous tension and barely concealed alarm. High Chancellor Vexthal's compound eyes scanned the assembled delegates as reports continued to pour in from across the galaxy. Each update painted the same impossible picture. Humans not just ignoring council restrictions, but treating them as starting points for increasingly spectacular demonstrations of capability. "Order," he called, though his voice carried less authority than it had 6 weeks ago. "We must address the situation." Ambassador Chun Wei stood in the center of the chamber, flanked by the same human delegation that had been here for the original pronouncement. But everything else had changed. Where once they had sat in the newcomer section, now they occupied the center floor normally reserved for major presentations. Where once other species had barely acknowledged their presence, now every alien eye was fixed on them with expressions ranging from wariness to outright fear. Honored delegates, Chin began, her voice carrying the confidence of someone whose species had just rewritten the rules of galactic civilization. I believe you requested this session to discuss human compliance with Council directives. The Aquarian delegate's tentacles writhed with agitation. Ambassador Chun, your species has violated every safety protocol, ignored every restriction, and demonstrated complete disregard for established scientific limitations. Have we? Chin asked innocently. Or have we simply shown that your limitations don't apply to us? Dr. Hexel, the Proximan physiologist, stood up with visible effort. Ambassador, the data we're receiving defies explanation. Humans are performing tasks that should be physically impossible for your species. Captain Morrison, still lounging in his chair with characteristic ease, raised his hand. Doc, can I ask you something? When you tested us, did you happen to mention that the tests were supposed to be impossible? Of course not. Standard evaluation protocol requires dash, right there. Morrison interrupted, standing up. That's your mistake. You never told us we couldn't do it. He walked toward the center of the chamber, his casual stride somehow more intimidating than any military march. See, humans have this funny quirk. When you tell us something is impossible, we get curious. When you tell us we're not good enough, we get motivated. And when you tell us there are things we're not allowed to do. Morrison's grin was sharp enough to cut through starship armor. Well, that's when things get interesting. A new voice echoed through the chamber as the main display activated. Admiral Sarah Chun appeared on the screen, broadcasting from Luna Base. Honored council members, thank you for allowing me to address this session. Admiral Chun, Chancellor Vexthal said carefully, your presence was not requested. No, but it's necessary. The Admiral's image was crystal clear, but, behind her, glimpses of activity suggested Luna Base was operating at unprecedented levels. You see, while you've been debating human limitations, we've been busy exceeding them. The display shifted to show a real-time tactical overview of human space. What the Council saw made several delegates emit sounds of distress. As of this moment, Admiral Chun continued, human vessels are operating in 47 sectors previously declared off-limits. Our mining operations have increased efficiency by an average of 340%. Our exploration teams have made first contact with 6 new species, including 3 that your council classified as impossibly hostile. The Titan delegate's massive form shifted uneasily. Admiral, these operations violate dozens of safety protocols. Your safety protocols, she corrected. We developed our own. The display changed again, showing detailed schematics of human equipment modifications. Every piece of technology had been enhanced, improved, or completely redesigned from its original specifications. You told us our tools weren't good enough, Admiral Chin explained. So we made them better. You said our ships weren't strong enough. So we strengthened them. You declared our crews inadequately trained. So we trained them harder. Dr. Zeph, the Zephyrian energy being, pulsed with what appeared to be panic. These modifications exceed manufacturer specifications by impossible margins. The equipment should fail catastrophically. Should. Captain Morrison agreed. But didn't. Funny how that works. Ambassador Chin stepped forward. Honored delegates, I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about the relationship between humanity and the concept of impossibility. She gestured, and the chamber's display showed historical footage from Earth. Humans walking on the moon, diving to ocean depths that should have crushed them, surviving in environments that should have been lethal. We've been doing impossible things for our entire history. We flew before we understood aerodynamics. We split atoms before we understood nuclear physics. We reached space before we had computers. The footage shifted to more recent events. The asteroid mining operation on KX 7739, the Defiance emerging from the Maelstrom Nebula, contact with the architects. The difference is, now we're doing impossible things with an audience. Chancellor Vexthal's mandibles clicked rapidly. Ambassador, Are you suggesting that human capabilities are unlimited? No, Chen replied. I'm suggesting that human capabilities are negotiable. The silence that followed was profound. It was broken by an emergency klaxon as new data flooded the chamber's systems. The source: Deep Space Monitoring Station Alpha 7, positioned at the edge of known space. This is Station Alpha 7, a panicked voice reported. We have a Priority 1 contact situation. Unknown massive objects emerging from hyperspace. Estimated size, impossible to confirm. Request immediate council response. The tactical display shifted to show the edge of the galaxy, where space itself seemed to be tearing open. Through the rifts came ships, if they could be called that, larger than moons, their design incomprehensible to any known technology. The Devourers, someone whispered. Every being in the chamber knew that name. The Devourers were a legend, a myth, the cautionary tale told to species who ventured too far into the unknown. Ancient beings from between galaxies who consumed entire civilizations. And they were emerging from hyperspace in a formation that suggested hostile intent. Council emergency protocols are now in effect, Chancellor Vexthal announced, his voice trembling. All member species are ordered to retreat to designated safe zones. Full evacuation of border sectors will commence immediately. Wait, Captain Morrison said loudly enough to be heard over the chaos. How many ships do these Devourer things have? The monitoring station's voice crackled back. Preliminary count suggests 12 vessels, each one the size of a small moon. Morrison looked at his fellow humans, then at the alien delegates. 12 ships. Captain Morrison, the Chancellor said urgently, this is not the time for human bravado. The Devourers destroyed 17 civilizations before retreating to dark space. Our combined fleets cannot what? Morrison interrupted. Cannot fight 12 ships. He turned to Ambassador Chun with a grin that made her want to simultaneously embrace and strangle him. Ma'am, remember when the Titan Consortium said we couldn't handle combat operations in hostile space? Captain, she warned, but she was already reaching for her emergency communicator. Admiral Chun. Morrison called out to the display. How long would it take to mobilize the fleet? Which fleet? The Admiral asked with dangerous calm. All of them. The display shifted to show human space, where lights were beginning to move as ships responded to emergency signals. Not just military vessels, but mining ships, exploration craft, cargo haulers, and private vessels. Every human ship capable of spaceflight was changing course toward the galactic rim. Captain Morrison, Chancellor Vexthal said desperately, human vessels cannot possibly engage the Devourers. Your species lacks the military capability. Morrison walked over to the side table where he'd left his beer 6 weeks ago. The bottle was still there, now warm and forgotten. He picked it up and looked at it thoughtfully. You know, he said conversationally, 6 weeks ago, you told us we couldn't handle dangerous jobs. Then, we handled them. You said we couldn't survive in hostile environments. Then, we thrived in them. You told us we weren't good enough to be equals in galactic civilization. He looked up at the assembled delegates with eyes that held no mercy whatsoever. Now you want us to run away from 12 ships. Ambassador Chun felt the familiar chill that came with recognizing a moment when history changed direction. Captain, ma'am, with respect, these folks just asked humanity to back down from a fight. Morrison's grin was the kind that had preceded every great human catastrophe and triumph throughout history. I think we have a traditional response to that kind of request. He raised the warm beer in a mock toast to the council chamber. Ladies and gentlemen, aliens and otherwise, I believe it's time for another demonstration of human capabilities. Morrison took a long drink from the bottle and set it down with finality. Hold my beer. The tactical display exploded with activity as every human ship in the galaxy changed course for the galactic rim. Mining vessels armed themselves with industrial cutting equipment. Exploration ships powered up experimental weapons systems. Military craft activated protocols that officially didn't exist. And, leading them all, broadcasting on all frequencies, Admiral Sarah Chen's voice carried the kind of authority that made star systems listen. All human vessels. This is Luna Base. We have contact with hostile aliens who think 12 ships is a scary number. Time to show them what scary really looks like. This is humanity. Come and take it. The Great Devourer War was about to begin, and humanity was about to teach the galaxy what happened when you told humans they couldn't fight. The Battle of Rim's Edge would be remembered as the day humanity taught the galaxy what the phrase, "hold my beer," actually meant. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Terra, flagship of a fleet that shouldn't have existed. Around her, holographic displays showed the impossible: 1,700 human vessels converging on coordinates at the galaxy's edge, where 12 moon-sized ships had begun systematically destroying everything in their path. "Admiral," reported Captain Stevens from the tactical station, "the Devourer fleet is maintaining formation. Initial analysis suggests their ships are approximately 4 kilometers long and heavily shielded. And our fleet composition? 300 military vessels, 800 modified civilian craft, 400 mining ships with improvised weaponry, and 200 exploration vessels with experimental equipment." Chen nodded grimly. "Standard armament? That's complicated, ma'am. Every ship appears to have been modified beyond original specifications. The mining ships are carrying weapons that technically don't exist. The exploration vessels have shield generators powered by technology we reverse-engineered from the architects. And the civilian craft?" Stevens paused, consulting his readouts. "Ma'am, the civilian craft are carrying weapons that violate several laws of physics." On the main display, the massive forms of the Devourer ships grew larger as they approached human space. Their design was incomprehensible. Organic curves merged with crystalline structures that pulsed with energy that made instruments scream. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer announced. "Source, lead Devourer vessel." The display shimmered, revealing a being that existed in more dimensions than human eyes were designed to process. When it spoke, the translation came through in harmonics that suggested vast intelligence and absolute contempt. "Small forms of this galaxy spiral. We are the devourers of civilizations. Your resistance is acknowledged but irrelevant. Retreat to your core worlds. Your consumption will be delayed but not prevented." Admiral Chen looked at the image for a long moment, then activated the fleet-wide communication channel. "All vessels, this is Admiral Chen. Did everyone hear that?" A chorus of confirmations came back from across the fleet. "Good. Now, I want everyone to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell our new friends." She turned back to the Devourer transmission. "Unknown vessel. This is Admiral Sarah Chun, representing the human species. We appreciate your offer, but we're going to have to decline." The being's form shifted in what might have been confusion. "You decline?" "That's correct. You see, we have a bit of a problem with people who tell us we can't do things. And consuming our civilization? Well, that definitely qualifies as something we can't allow." "Small form, you fail to comprehend. We have consumed 17 civilizations. Your combined galactic fleets could not resist us. What can one species accomplish?" Chen smiled with the kind of warmth that had preceded humanity's greatest victories. "I'm glad you asked. Fleet, prepare for demonstration protocol." What happened next defied every military doctrine in galactic history. The human fleet didn't advance in formation. They didn't follow standard tactical approaches. Instead, they scattered across space in patterns that looked like chaos but moved with deadly precision. Leading the attack was the UES Defiance, Captain Vasquez's exploration vessel that had somehow returned from the architect dimension with weapons that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Her first salvo didn't just hit the lead Devourer ship, it hit the same ship in multiple dimensional planes at once. The result was spectacular. The massive vessel, which had survived attacks from entire civilizations, began tearing itself apart as different parts of its structure existed in conflicting realities. "What was that?" the Devourer entity demanded. "That," Captain Vasquez's voice crackled over the comm, "was us being creative." The mining ships attacked next. Chief Sullivan's operation had been joined by miners from across human space, each bringing their own interpretation of mining equipment. Plasma cutters designed to slice through asteroids found new purpose cutting through Devourer hull plating. Gravity manipulators meant for moving or began warping space around enemy vessels. One mining ship, the UES Pick and Shovel, flew directly into a Devourer ship's weapons array and began mining it. The alien vessel's sophisticated energy weapons were systematically dismantled and extracted like valuable ore. Small forms. The Devourer communication came again, now tinged with something that might have been uncertainty. Your tactics are unconventional. Unconventional. Admiral Chen laughed. Friend, we're just getting started. The civilian vessels joined the fight with modifications that made the Council's safety engineers weep. Cargo haulers had been converted into missile platforms launching payloads of compressed human stubbornness. Passenger liners deployed tourist shuttles armed with weapons that their makers had built just to see if we could. But it was the military vessels that provided the symphony's crescendo. The UES Indomitable, a heavy cruiser under Captain Rodriguez's command, demonstrated why humans didn't believe in impossible odds. Faced with a Devourer ship 5 times its size, Rodriguez ordered ramming speed. Captain, his tactical officer protested, our shields can't survive that kind of impact. Who said anything about shields? Rodriguez replied, all power to engines. If we're going down, we're taking them with us. The Indomitable struck the Devourer vessel at a significant fraction of light speed. The impact should have destroyed both ships. Instead, the human vessel emerged from the other side of the alien craft, trailing debris and plasma, but very much intact. How? The Devourer entity's communication now carried distinct notes of alarm. Captain Morrison's voice came over the fleet channel from his position aboard the Terra's sister ship. Simple. We built our ships to be tougher than we are. And we're really, really tough. The battle raged for 6 hours. By any reasonable standard, the human fleet should have been annihilated in the first 20 minutes. Instead, they systematically dismantled 11 of the 12 Devourer vessels using tactics that seemed to have been developed by people who didn't understand the concept of impossible. When the smoke cleared, the remaining Devourer ship hung motionless in space, its organic hull scarred by weapons that shouldn't have existed and damaged by strategies that violated every known principle of space combat. Small forms. The entity's voice came one final time, but now it carried something that sounded remarkably like respect. We miscalculated. Admiral Chen opened a channel to the surviving vessel. How's that? We consumed 17 civilizations by understanding their limitations and exploiting them. But your species appears to lack limitations. Oh, we have limitations, Chen replied casually. We just don't let them limit us. This is confusing. Captain Morrison's laughter echoed across the communication channel. Yeah, we get that a lot. Look, no hard feelings, but maybe find a galaxy that doesn't have humans in it. Because this one's taken. We acknowledge. Withdrawal protocols initiated. The massive ship began to turn away from human space, its hull shimmering as it prepared to enter hyperspace. Wait, Admiral Chen called out. Before you go, there's something you should know. What is that? Chen's smile carried the warmth of someone who had just proved a point that had needed proving. When you tell humans they can't do something, you're not giving us a limitation. You're giving us a goal. The Devourer ship disappeared into hyperspace without another word. Across the fleet, human vessels began the process of damage assessment and casualty reports. Miraculously, despite engaging in combat that should have been suicidal, human losses were minimal. Ships that should have been destroyed were battered but functional. Crews that should have been vaporized were bruised but triumphant. Admiral, Captain Stevens reported, fleet status showing 94% operational. Casualties are remarkably light considering we just did the impossible again? Yes, ma'am. Chen activated the fleet-wide channel one more time. All vessels, this is Admiral Chen. Outstanding work today, everyone. Return to stations and prepare for the Victory Tour. Victory Tour, ma'am? We're going to visit every member world of the Galactic Council and explain what just happened here. The communication came from the Galactic Council chambers, where Chancellor Vexthal's voice carried a mixture of amazement and terror. Admiral Chen, the Council wishes to discuss recent events. I'm sure they do, Chen replied. We'll be there in 72 hours. Admiral, perhaps we were hasty in our initial evaluation of human capabilities. Perhaps. There was a long pause before the Chancellor spoke again. What are humanity's intentions regarding the galactic community? Chen looked out at her fleet, 1,700 ships crewed by beings who had just proven that the word impossible was more of a suggestion than a rule. Chancellor, that depends entirely on whether anyone else wants to tell us what we can't do. Another pause. The Council withdraws all previous restrictions on human activities. Smart choice. Chen turned to her communications officer. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them the beer is officially on ice. 72 hours later, Captain Morrison stood before the Galactic Council, a fresh beer in his hand, and the kind of grin that suggested the universe had just become a much more interesting place. Honored delegates, he began. Thank you for this opportunity to address your concerns about human limitations. He gestured to the holographic display showing the wreckage of 11 Devourer ships drifting at the galaxy's edge. As you can see, we've conducted a comprehensive field test of your theories regarding our species' capabilities. Morrison took a drink from his beer and set it down on the podium. The results were educational. Chancellor Vexthul leaned forward. Captain Morrison, the Council acknowledges that human capabilities may have been underestimated. May have been. Morrison's laugh echoed through the chamber. Chancellor, you told us we couldn't handle dangerous jobs. We turned asteroid mining into an art form. You said we couldn't survive hostile environments. We made friends with beings that exist in 11 dimensions. You declared us unfit for military service. We just saved the galaxy from an invasion that terrified everyone else. He picked up his beer again and looked at the assembled delegates. The question isn't what humans can't do. The question is what you're going to tell us we can't do next. Ambassador Chen stepped forward. The human delegation proposes a new arrangement with the Galactic Council. What arrangement? Full membership. No restrictions. No limitations. No safety protocols we didn't write ourselves. And in return, Chen's smile was warm, genuine, and absolutely terrifying. In return, the next time something impossible threatens the galaxy, we'll be here to handle it. She gestured to Morrison's beer. Just don't expect us to do it sober. The vote was unanimous. Later, in the Council archives, historians would record the day that humanity joined the galactic community as full equals. They would document the Battle of Rim's Edge as the moment when one species redefined what was possible. But in the smaller archives, in the personal logs and private messages, they would remember 3 words that changed everything. 3 words that meant someone was about to do something spectacular. 3 words that declared war on the very concept of impossibility. 3 words that became humanity's gift to the galaxy. Hold my beer. And across the stars, on worlds beyond counting, beings looked up at the night sky and wondered what impossible thing the humans would do next. The answer, as always, was simple. Whatever they weren't supposed to.